Well, welcome back to the Batuta Advocate radio show. For the first time in the podcast history, this is recorded from the road here in Townsville. I've just wrapped up our first of many live shows to come on the Batuta Advocate Roadshow. We just finished up with this crowd up here. It was a lovely night. They showed us a lot of northern hospitality, didn't they, Errol?
Yeah, it was fantastic to spend the night in Townsville last night. It's a beautiful town, lots of beautiful things to look at. It was a good show.
And we've got plenty more to come on the Batuta Advocate Roadshow. We've got Toowoomba on the 6th of November, Melbourne Cup Day. That should be interesting. Brisbane on the 8th of November at the QPAC. And then down to Wollongong on the 11th of November. Newcastle on the 13th. Bouncing around a bit, but then right over to Perth on the 16th of November. Melbourne on the 17th, down there at Hamer Hall. Quite a big venue, I've been told.
Yeah, it's pretty big down there, I reckon.
And then Adelaide, 22nd of November. Of course, heading back up north to Canberra on the 30th. And then the 1st of December, finishing the run at the Sydney Opera House Concert Hall. Yeah, still a lot to do, but it seems to be
there's
going
9 more shows left.
Yeah,
9 more to go.
Seems to be going well. Townsville were very receptive. We'll see if the Southerners appreciate it as much. I'm sure they will. There's something in it for everyone.
Yeah, no, the crowd will be interesting on Melbourne Cup Day in Toowoomba, I suppose, because the show kicks off there at 8 o'clock, so I'm expecting people to be really festive.
Yeah. Well, festive is what we want. We don't want the yawns after a big day on the punt. I'm sure they know how to handle their grog up there in Toowoomba. Now, last week's podcast was one of the biggest ones we've ever done, actually. Some amazing numbers coming through there. Hundreds of thousands of listens with Kevin Rudd. Obviously, it's not every day that a regional radio station like ours gets access to a former Prime Minister for an hour, at least. What did you think of it?
Yeah, no, he's certainly changed his tune since the last time I met him in 2006. He's certainly not bitter at all, though. I'm glad it's his rapid demise from politics didn't have any lasting effects on him, and I'm glad he's been able to move on to various other jobs in New York.
Yeah, it's great. It's good to have options after a life in politics, and that way you don't have to spend the rest of your life talking about politics and the people that hurt you and the people that you have, undying grudges against.
Yeah, there was one part, though, in the podcast that we didn't get to last week that I wanted to talk to him about was the actual Kevin 07 campaign itself. But interestingly enough, the second podcast edition of our radio show that we did was actually with the man, the architect of the Kevin 07 campaign. It was Kevin Rudd's media advisor, Lachie Harris. He's now he was an entrepreneurial businessman now. But yeah, that was our second podcast, and I think there's a lot of people who have subscribed to our show since, who I think would get a lot of value out of listening to that interview that we did with Lachlan. Yes.
No, it's good to see. We've met Kevin. We've heard Kevin's story. But obviously when you're talking to someone of, that big a profile, you don't often hear about the people behind the scenes, behind them. And that's what this interview with Lachie Harris is good for. It explains kind of, the people that were on the ground, during the campaign, during his stint as Prime Minister, his first one anyway. So I reckon we'll delve into that. We'll bring this one back up for the listeners who might have missed it the first time. This is Lachie Harris, former media advisor for Kevin Rudd, back when there was a bit of, I guess, prestige around the title media advisor.
And there was a bit of prestige around the term of Prime Minister as well, I guess.
Yes. No, back before they were just throwaway titles. Yeah, you're right. Back before they were either ex-hacks or ex-public servants that only last a little while. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who missed it last time, this is Lachie Harris. Today we are talking about the snouts in the trough, the Jared Kushners of the world, the Ashbys of the world, and a few other names that we'll get to a bit later. As many of you are aware, in politics and in media, there are people who may not be particularly well known or recognised, who are calling shots and pulling strings. Big screen depictions like Wag the Dog, In the Mix and West Wing pay homage to these influential figures who are the ears and the minds of important political figures. And our guest, who we will introduce shortly, Lachie Harris, is one of those people and is an authority on this whole world. But Errol,
Yep.
Political staffers.
Yeah, staffers. Well, more specifically, I think what's the role of a politician's media advisor? Why does everyone need a media advisor from your Malcolm Turnbulls to your Mark Coultons?
We've heard about advisors and of all varieties for many years now.
Yep.
As I mentioned earlier, James Ashby, who found himself in a bit of trouble a couple of times. Rose from the ashes and came back to cause more shit. Peter Credlin, arguably the leader of the Liberal Party under the Abbott government. And now, more recently, the young Vicky Campion, who you and I both know, Errol, and is a lovely lady. We won't be running her down too much in this podcast, but she has found herself in a spot of trouble. She got too close.
Yeah, which kind of makes me think, how close does a media advisor get to the person they're supposed to serve? Are they at arm's shoulder reach or are they at dick's reach?
Before I became Clancy Overall editor of the Batuta Advocate, I worked in this field, and you did too, Errol. What was your take on it? It was obviously a while ago.
Well, I worked on the Gordon Brown campaign, the last election.
In England, this is?
In England. And Gordon, he tried his best to form a government with the Liberal Democrats, but it ended up going to shit. And he went to Her Majesty and said, "Look, I can't form a government here, so I'm going to have to resign as the Prime Minister." And the Queen said, "Righto, well, we'll ask David Cameron."
And then that must hurt you as well as someone who worked later.
No, it's just a thing that happened. And then afterwards, I was offered a very plum job at the News of the World, but that only lasted about a year until I was
caught fiddling with phones.
Yeah, the few embarrassing moments in front of the Leveson inquiry there.
And it's hard to say. It'd be hard for any journalist in this country to say that they don't have a history like that. Whether they started as a journalist or ended up a journalist, everyone's and that's what we'll get to later with our guest. But I myself, I announce it. Might be a conflict of interest, but I worked under Brian Littleproud, under Sir Joe.
Yep.
He's obviously the father of David Littleproud, now the current member for the Maranoa, our local member.
Yeah, and he's a big no voter too.
So, big no voter, Maranoa, right? Yeah. That's the thing. And between 1983 and 1987. Mate, the shit we got away with, you wouldn't believe it. That was back when you could actually have people killed, under the under the corrugated iron curtain of Sir Joe. Mate, you don't know what went down. I mean, obviously you don't, because I've told you over a few beers. I
know two good men which are buried under Cloudland at the moment. They were, just as a journalist under Joe, you sort of had to know your place.
I know. And when you start talking to cops who don't know their place...
Yeah,
the Dean brothers come in with the swinging wrecking ball, and all of a sudden you're part of a new set of apartments. But like in that era, you could have a pregnant mistress, and she would be sent down south. You wouldn't have to, you wouldn't have to confront. You wouldn't have to worry about front pages. You wouldn't have to worry about anything like that because it was pre-social media, right? There was a lot less access. There was a lot less shit talk. And political staffers were completely in control of what was said. Well, we will introduce our guest now. He's had to sit through a lot. Today's guest is one of those figures that we're talking about. Master of the dark arts, you could say. He is the man behind one of the men behind the most recognisable political campaigns in recent history. The campaign that swept the second longest serving Prime Minister out of power and swept in one of the shortest serving Prime Ministers. That man is Lachie Harris. One of the men behind Kevin 07. Harris, as well as being in the inner circle of the ministerial wing for a time, is also responsible for founding the now iconic swimwear label, Budgie Smuggler, the energy startup One Big Switch, and the controversial lobbying platform known as GetUp. He has worked in business, media, politics, and he's here to have a chat with us about the lay of the land and the dark arts. Thanks for joining us, Lachie.
It's great to be here. I had no idea I was amongst such notorious but experienced colleagues.
Yeah, well, there was a statute of limitations over a lot of the things we did, particularly in England. Firstly, Lachie, taking into account after that introduction, a lot of our listeners now dislike you a lot, as they might assume you were a snout in the trough. But please, we need to know a bit more about you, how you ended up in that position, and we know you got out. You know, Labor trains the best and keeps the rest, as do most political parties. And you might still have ties to the party with or without factions. We need to know what happened in your life that made you decide to spend your mid-20s standing next to Kevin Rudd.
Yeah, it's obviously dropped as a child, I think, now I look back on it. But look, I should start to say that political staffers are like rugby league players. The vast majority of them are quite nice people who stay in the background, do their job, and you never hear about them. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, there's the occasional absolute fuck-up who turns up, and they're the ones who end up in the media and everyone reads about because they, do something outrageous, basically. But look, the vast majority of them are genuinely really hard-working, nice people, not that political, just doing a job.
Right. Well, tell us a little bit how you became associated with the Labor Party.
I mean, I was not a very political kid when I was growing up. I just went to uni like everyone, and I was actually working for the Koori Mail, which is another great and august journal, the Aboriginal newspaper here in Australia. And I was doing a lot of time up in the Territory and that sort of stuff. And I think it was in about 2002 or early 2003. And I think I just saw a job in the paper, to tell you the truth. There was the shadow, the assistant advisor to the shadow Indigenous Affairs Minister, and this was when Labor was at its absolute lowest nadir, 2003.
Under Crean.
Yeah. And I honestly seriously think no one else put an application in. I'd been to law school, I'd worked a bit as a journo, but I was like 23 as green as, and I just think it was one of those things where Labor was so low in the polls, and so it would seem so impossible they'd ever win that no one else wanted the job.
Yeah, right.
So moving on, you went from that job. So you finally had your foot in the door at the ALP.
Yeah.
How was the journey going from there to being in the box seat?
Because you're not a Queenslander as well.
I know,
we should mention that.
And you're not an academic like Kevin either. So
there's the understatement of the year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Look, first of all, it's great fun. If you like politics, Canberra is like, go down and work in Parliament House. It's really good fun. It's kind of like, if you're a skier working at Thredbo. If you're a fanatic, you love it. And so for 5 years, I just put my head down and stuck around. It's one of those jobs, the vast majority of people churn out after 2 years, because it's without any word of exaggeration, it is 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Yep.
So for most of that time, I would have a conference call at 6:15 every morning and at 6:30 every night, and that was 365 days a year. And days that you think you're going to, Christmas Day, Easter Sunday, New Year's Day, they're really busy days in federal politics. So if you can stick it out, there's lots of opportunities, but most people burn out after a couple of years and just go I'm going to go and have a life, thanks, I'm out of here.
In your opinion, did you spend that much time on the road, face to face, hand in hand with Kevin Rudd?
I spent a lot of time with him, but I'm still single, if that's what you're asking.
He didn't make you pregnant?
No,
that would have been very difficult. No, look, I don't want to stick the boot into Barney. Everyone else had to go, but it's not easy. And it's very destructive. Politics is just like a flamethrower to family life. There's no doubt about that. Whether you're married, single, got a girlfriend, a boyfriend, yada yada, and that's because it's a bloody big country. Federal politicians have to travel around, and I really respect anyone who has the balls to go in and do it, or the gumption to go in and do politics, and if they can hold their family together. Quite frankly, that's the exceptional event. The blow-ups, the breakups, the affairs, to me, we've almost designed this industry to destroy family life in many ways. We create a city in Canberra, which is the capital. They spend 26 weeks a year there. Everyone there is away from their families. You work late, you kind of drink a lot, it's an absolute catastrophe. And then between that 26 weeks, the senior guys and girls travel the whole time as well. So I don't sort of sit around when I see politicians like self-exploding basically their life. It's kind of like that's what the system's set up to do in some ways, or it's an almost inevitability. The exceptional event is the person who goes in, works 20 years and has a great life and a great marriage and survives. That is very unusual.
Like Bob Catter, you know. What we'd say is probably one of the few sensible men down there, and
might be the hat.
Well, he is probably one of the last truly honest people down there, because he's only got one party to answer for, and he's in charge of it. So
look, I think
he hasn't got any of the red tape that ties him up.
It's very easy to be authentic. It's very easy to be authentic when you don't have any power. It's bloody hard the other way around, let me tell you.
Well, under.
Can we come to Kennedy sometime, so I think. But you know, we will wrap there on those defamatory comments about Bob Catter.
All right, so let's take it back to the beginning. How did a boy from pre-gentrification Balmain find himself turning his back on big business, on progress, on economic capitalisation of the working class? How did you end up with an ALP logo over your heart on the team shirt?
That's an interesting question. I've never do you know, I actually think for me, I'm the youngest of 5 boys, right?
Yeah.
And we're very close in age. My oldest brother is 5.5 years older than me. And so we grew up in a tribal fight, basically. And it was great. It was amazing. I had an incredible upbringing.
It was a race to the top for attention. Yeah. Was it a race to the top?
It was. There was a lot of fighting for attention. There was a lot of fighting and scrapping for everything. But actually, my brothers, we were very close, and I think it just gave me this heightened sense of what bullying is and how much I just cannot stand it. And it's more because my brothers didn't bully me that much. I think we were in such an environment where there was a perfect hierarchy where it could have happened. But I just had this, this sense of kind of bullies. And I just felt like at that time, and I'm not suggesting the Labor Party's always on the right side of this argument, the other side's always on the wrong side, but at that time in history, with the Indigenous stuff, with the government being in power for 7 or 8 years and just sticking it to these people, I was just like, that is bullying. And I was just like, basically, fuck that. I'm going to go in there and do something about that. It wasn't that complex. It was just that. Do
you think some of that came from your mother's side, the Rossi, the Italian? Was there any element of that?
It's a big, I went to a Jesuit school, a big, definitely social justice, Italian kind of. Northern Italian, by the way.
He's a fair-skinned little Italian.
Not like those Southerners. I'm about as Italian as Stella Artois beer, unfortunately. Definitely the sense of social justice came from there. But I think, politics changes a lot and parties come and go. But at that point in time, I think the government, the Howard government at that very moment was suffering from pretty severe political hubris. Mm-hmm. And they needed, it was just crying out to come in and punch back, basically. And I'm not suggesting that
Costello couldn't do that?
I don't think he had it in him, unfortunately.
But his reputation is a bully, right?
I don't mean to suggest that the Howard government was all bad. I've been around long enough to know that they were a good government. They probably, by that stage, you've been around for that long, you just start making sloppy, inconsiderate decisions and you start believing your own bullshit a bit.
Intervention.
And other matters and the way they reacted, all that black armband view of history stuff, it was all bullshit. It was just
and work
you've
choices.
Been around too long, work choices, you need to go, guys. And that was... For me, and I'm not suggesting that the mission of the Labor Party is not important to me, but I guess I didn't grow up an incredibly politicised person. I think that was the crystallisation point.
So when you got to the point where you were working on the 2007 campaign against this, this Howard Everest that had never been conquered by anyone over the past 10 to 15 years, was there a point where you were like, we could actually fucking do this?
Not until the very, very end. I think others around us saw it earlier, but I worked on 04 and people, when Latham people forget when Latham first came in.
Yeah.
Like he was like, he was wrong footing Howard left, right, and centre, and people were like, oh, we've got this one in the bag.
He had some momentum.
Yeah, he blew it up well before the election.
Was
But
that the handshake?
Yeah.
The handshake.
the handshake was the cherry on the cake. For a little while there, he was looking pretty good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, well, he's doing all right now too. He's managed to recover from that handshake. I guess he's
You could maybe you should give him a column in the paper.
Yeah, we might interview him.
I remember I was sitting in the campaign headquarters when the paper came out that day, and a very experienced press sec was sitting next to me, and we were there. It's 5 a.m. in the morning. Paper comes out with the photo on it, and he looks at me and he said, "If there was any doubt we are absolutely fucked, that is now erased."
What was his thinking? Do you have any? Do you think he was coming in from that Westie? I'm going to fuck this Silvertail up. What was it?
I don't think
Howard.
Or was it just he couldn't control himself?
Yeah.
He thought he saw a cab driver.
They had the dirt file open for him then.
They went after him pretty hard, and they go after you. And the thing about what you probably maybe people don't understand is politics, particularly being a leader or the opposition leader or the Prime Minister. It's like a ginormous pressure cooker, and what it does is it takes all the elements of your character and it excludes them out of you, and it exaggerates them, the good stuff and the bad stuff. So like people who loved Rudd and saw him on Sunrise and thought he was so friendly, and that was an exaggerated version of Rudd's good parts.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the stuff that came out of Latham, which was bad. It's like it pressures your character, and it exaggerates every little fissure, good and bad, in your character. And so I always say, look, basically neither lionise these people as much as some people do. Don't love them as much as the true lovers, but don't hate them as much as the true haters either. They're actually not that far.
What about Latham right now? What would you say? How would you say people could treat that legacy of the Labor Party, who's currently sitting on Facebook right now calling people? I mean,
I know I'm
snowflakes.
He's not to my taste, but it's a free country. Good on him, get out there. He's got to make a living, and so it's not to my taste. But look, I just don't think politics is helped at all by just hating people on any side. Like, he's just a guy. He's trying to make a living. He's saying stuff that I don't agree in, but I don't care. Like, good on him. If I saw him in the street, I'd say, "G'day, Mark. How are you?"
You don't think there's people that are scared of him right now? People that are being made to feel like they are at risk because of him?
I don't know. Look, I'm not suggesting nothing has consequences.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if he's at the point where I'd be like, it's more important probably just to not bother engaging than it is important to engage and slap him down and promote some kind of aggressive reply. It's just not worth that. Good on you. Do what you want to do. Not my style.
Yeah, right.
All right. How about we talk life after the machine, when politics ends for people, which it often has for ex-prime ministers, ex-staffers, even journalists who've ended up working down there from time to time. But are you able to keep the values that you took down there? Can you take them into business? Like, say, for example, if you went down there and worked for the Labor Party, could you work for a stockbroker?
In the end, politics is Keating has this great line where he says every political career ends up either being carried out in a box. The only question is, are your pallbearers crying or not? And it's so true. Like, everyone just gets absolutely smashed, barreled, and the closer you get to the top, the worse the exit. Well, even if Barnaby Joyce loses his job next week, I'd take a very serious bet that we have only seen Barnaby Mark 1. There will be a Barnaby Mark 2, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a Barnaby Mark 3.
He could be head of his local branch of H&R Block in Glen Innes, couldn't he?
I think he's more likely to be the next Corey Bernardi than he is.
He had a party.
If you were a Scott Ludlam, where you're just, you're a mid-ranking green dude.
A lot of them go. Look, it's funny. A lot of them don't do a lot. Really, like, a lot of them, it's really hard for them, and I think it's because, like,
except for Michael Baird, the former Premier of New South Wales, Campbell Newman, former Premier of Queensland. They all seem to find a bit of work.
Well, they both had Jesus help them find a job.
I'm not breaking out the banjo for them. I'm just like, it's sort of sad. You see these,
Anna Bligh, now the
guys
Bankers
and girls, and
Association
you just go, what are you doing? And they're just wandering around, drinking coffee, doing nothing, basically. But no, look, there's jobs to be done, and you see Peter Beattie's now the kind of on the NRL commission.
Yeah. He was the Premier during Wayne's Broncos, so he knows. All right, back when there was only one team. There was one team in Queensland, and it was like Origin. It was just like Broncos. Well,
it was horrendous. It was horrendous to watch. I'm a Tigers fan. There's nothing worse. Bunch of pumped up car thief Queensland footy players going around kicking everyone's ass every week. It's horrendous.
Your rugby league kind of allegiances have probably... You've experienced similar things with rugby league, with the Catholic Church and the Labor Party in the last 10 years. I mean, all these institutions are falling around you.
I had two great institutions in my life, basically, until the age of 37, was the Catholic Church and the Labor Party, and both of them basically gone through the greatest existential crisis ever. So if you're wondering why I'm wandering around and like a complete idiot...
Let's not forget Balmain, mate. No one even...
Balmain Tigers didn't have an existential crisis. They just, they're trying to. They're having more of just a little minor crisis of self-confidence.
Well, we're going to actually finish on that note, I reckon. We'll finish with one more question. As someone who knows the ropes, when are you going to move to somewhere really shit like Bennelong? And
it's not shit in Bennelong.
No, well, it's like the only reason I know about Bennelong is because of that Sydney American, and that little dash they had for the by-election down there, which seems like a neck and neck seat. When is this light-skinned Italian platform lobbyist magnate going to make a run?
I dare say when Albo makes a cunt of himself, he can move into Grainler, I reckon.
Nah, look, it's not on my radar.
That's my hot tip.
I hate to disappoint you. But look, my view.
You could move north. You could move like north of the harbour, and you could try and hop into hockey seat.
Mate, I'm a Balmain boy. I'm not going north. Don't worry about that. Yeah. Look, if I woke up one day and I had 5 things that were crystal clear in my mind I wanted to do, and the only way to get them done was to be in Parliament, that's the day I'd start running, but I don't have that list, and that's why I'm not running.
Righto. Well, you can make a lot more money in the private sector anyway. So thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
Mr. Harris.
Thanks for coming down, Loch.
Thanks, mate.
And that was Lachlan Harris, everyone. I hope you got a kick out of that. We'll hopefully see you out on the road. Until next week, my name is Errol Parker, and never talk to the cops without legal counsel present.
And I'm Clancy Overall. We hope to see you all on the road, the Batuta Advocate Roadshow. It's been getting some wild reviews. Matt Scott was there at the show in Townsville last night, and he said it's one of the most interesting and important stage productions of recent memory. Anyway, until next time, you be kind to each other.